So now that we have learned so much about various types of shapes like polygons, quadrilaterals, triangles, angles, let's now talk about some three-dimensional shapes. Now, what are three-dimensional shapes? So what do we mean by it? Think of these examples. You think of this table, not only the picture of the table, but a real table lying inside your room. Look at the table. Look at a room. So when you look at the room, how do you define the size of the room? So if I ask you what is the size of your room, how would you tell me? So you need to specify three parameters to define the size of the room. And what are the three parameters? Length of the room, width of the room, and height of the room. So length, breadth and height, these are the three parameters which are needed to define the size of the room. So this is a three-dimensional shape. This is not two-dimensional. You cannot have the room on a piece of paper. Like we have drawn it on a piece of paper, but the actual room, it has got three dimensions. So a paper is not a three-dimensional shape. A sheet of paper is a two-dimensional shape. So when you look at a sheet of paper, this is how it looks like. So it has length and breadth. So there is no height involved as such. So any such shape which involves three dimensions, length, breadth and height, they are categorized as three-dimensional shapes. When you look at this table has its length, width and height. So without these three dimensions, you cannot specify the size of the table. Look at the car. So in this car also, you have the length of the car, the breadth of the car, and also the height of the car. So again, three dimensions needed here also. Think of a house, one of the best examples. In a house also you have length, breadth, and height. So all these objects are three-dimensional objects. And now we are going to talk about some three-dimensional shapes. Now, whatever we have discussed so far, whether it is a rectangle or a quadrilateral or a parallelogram, if you would have seen, they only had two dimensions, length and breadth. So that's it. You think of a kite, all of them, they do not have the third dimension, which is height. But now we are going to talk about objects with three dimensions. So how can we differentiate two-dimensional shapes from three-dimensional shapes? So two-dimensional figures will only have two dimensions, that is length and breadth. So I'll take one example and I will show you that how two-dimensional objects can together make a three-dimensional object. So this playing card, this is a two-dimensional object. Why? Because we just have length and breadth to define its size. If this is the length and this is the breadth, so only two dimensions are needed to define the size of this playing card. Now, when I talk about a three-dimensional shape, it should have three dimensions, length, breadth and height. Now, I will show you that how using multiple playing cards, we can make a three-dimensional shape. Let's say instead of one playing card, I take 7 playing cards and then arrange them like this. So, I build a tower. And this tower, do you think it is two-dimensional? It is not two-dimensional because this time you have its length, you have its height, and you also have its width. So three dimensions are now needed to define the size of this tower which we have created. So what do we understand from this? That many two-dimensional objects together can form a three-dimensional shape. So in simple words, two-dimensional means you only need two parameters to define the size of that object. Three-dimensional means you need three dimensions or three parameters to define the size of that object. Now, these are some of the figures which we have learned so far, like rectangle, triangle, square, pentagon, circle, and all of these are two-dimensional. You see, you talk about a circle, you talk about radius, diameter, chord, and everything is two-dimensional. Another interesting way to distinguish between two-dimensional and three-dimensional is that two-dimensional is like something which you can actually draw on a sheet of paper. Even though we can draw three-dimensional figures also on a sheet of paper, but with certain strategies. But as such, let's say that you have a bottle with you, a bottle of water. If you keep that bottle of water, Let's say that if you have a bottle of water, if you keep that bottle of water on a sheet of paper, what happens? Does it lie along the sheet of the paper? No. It stands protruded out of the sheet of paper. That's because of the height of that bottle. That height is the third dimension which doesn't get accommodated on that sheet of paper. Right? So that's how we can distinguish that the bottle of water is not two-dimensional but three-dimensional. So these are all examples of 2D figures. Now what about 3D figures? When you look at figures like a sphere, like think of a ball. A ball is not a circle. A ball is a sphere. Think of any ball that comes to your mind. Now when you keep a ball on a sheet of paper, what happens? Does the ball lie along the sheet of the paper? No. It stands protruded out of the paper. That's because of the height of the ball, the third dimension of the ball. So it doesn't get accommodated on the plane of the paper. So paper is two-dimensional. It just has length and breadth. So it cannot accommodate the third dimension which the ball has. So sphere is three-dimensional. You think of a cone. The best example of cone that you can think of is the ice cream cone. So if you think of that cone, if you make it lie on a sheet of paper in any way you want, do you think it will lie along the sheet of the paper? No. This will also stand protruded because this is again three-dimensional. You think of a cuboid like a matchbox. So that also has a height, a length and a breadth. Think of a cube, maybe the dice in your Ludo, when you play Ludo, the dice. So that's a cube. So that's not a square, that's a cube. So these are all examples of three-dimensional figures that we are going to discuss now.